This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidhu. It's Friday, September 20th. This is Africa 54. Fear rules in Zimbabwean hospitals as the doctors and nurses strike continues. Bill Gates, co-founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, sounds the alarm on climate change. And in our entertainment segment, the distinct sounds of Pan-African singer Lena Bahule. We begin our broadcast tonight with a late-breaking development out of Southern Africa. A Zimbabwean doctor and union leader who went missing during a bitter pay strike has been found alive, according to the police and his union. A police spokesman says Dr. Peter Magombei was located in Nyabira, 40 kilometers west of Harare, Thursday night. Authorities are now investigating what had happened to him. Meanwhile, as the doctors and nurses strike drags on, government hospitals are turning away patients, and fear continues to impair Zimbabwe's struggling health system. VOA's Anita Powell has more from Harare.
If there is one thing that unites doctors and patients, it's fear. Zimbabwe's public health system is ailing amid a shattered economy and triple-digit inflation. Administrators, doctors, and patients told VOA that hospitals often struggle to get supplies. Government doctors say they can't make ends meet on an average salary worth just $100 a month. But as they have learned, speaking out has consequences. Colleagues of Magombei's read out a message he sent them shortly before his disappearance.
Do not say I did not warn you. Keep on doing what you are doing. You will be taken by a whirlwind. We are getting close now, which is a threat that you will disappear. Okay? So this was a screenshot from him a few days before this incident. So we are very, very much worried about what really happened.
A different kind of fear is what has kept Dorcas Nyatoti away from hospitals for decades. When her feet, afflicted by childhood polio, give her pain, she grits her teeth or takes over-the-counter drugs. She says that's because every time she's approached a hospital, she's quoted terrifying prices, despite her lack of income.
I feel pain, but there's nothing I can do, because this is the world I am. This is my country.
And fear is what kept teacher Milka Guadaringa from seeking help for more than a decade, as an abdominal tumor grew to a staggering 12 kilograms before it was successfully removed by doctors at the nation's largest hospital.
I had so many fears, so I was not willing to come. I was very much afraid.
Her doctors say the problem isn't lack of medical skills, it's fear.
As a lot of patients or a lot of people are suffering in their homes, they are scared, they are not sure what is going to happen to them. So she is a wonderful success story, which we wish everyone to be aware.
VOA met with Dr. Magombei last week, days before he went missing. At the time, he was blunt about Zimbabwe's challenges and his own.
I love Zimbabwe, and my colleagues would agree with me that they also love Zimbabwe. We love our country, it's beautiful. However, yeah, it doesn't negate the fact that when the economy is deteriorating like this, we are forced to think outside the box.
2 days later, Dr. Magombei disappeared. Anita Powell, VOA News, Harare.
Former Tunisian Prime Minister Zine El Abidine Ben Ali died in exile Thursday in Saudi Arabia. His ouster in 2011 uprising triggered the Arab Spring revolutions. Ben Ali fled Tunisia in January 2011 as many Tunisians vehemently demonstrated against his oppressive rule during a revolution that inspired uprisings across North Africa and the Middle East and resulted in a democratic transition in Tunisia. A former security chief, Ben Ali, had run Tunisia for 23 years, seizing power as prime minister in 1987 after declaring President Habib Bourguiba medically unfit to rule. A family lawyer says Ben Ali's funeral is to be held on Friday. Now, escalating tensions between the United States and Iran is likely to overshadow next week's annual United Nations General Assembly meetings in New York. But the UN Secretary General hopes to keep the mounting emergency over climate change in the spotlight. VOA UN correspondent Margaret Bashir explains.
The drone attacks on two major oil facilities in Saudi Arabia a week ago have shifted what at first appeared to be a possible opportunity for an opening in U.S.-Iranian relations into an urgency to avert a dangerous escalation. President Trump tightened sanctions on Tehran and said it looks like Iran was the culprit.
Well, it's looking that way. We'll have some pretty good, we're having some very strong studies done, but it's certainly looking that way at this moment, and we'll let you know. As soon as we find out definitively, we'll let you know, but it does look that way.
The prospect of a Trump-Rouhani summit, widely speculated about in the lead-up to New York, appears unlikely now. But the possibility was always a larger gamble for the Iranian leader than the American one.
So if there is a meeting with President Trump in New York and the Iranian president gets nothing in return, that photo opportunity might work well for President Trump in the United States for his base. But back in Tehran, Rouhani will be attacked as somebody who is naive, who should have never shown up for that meeting, because they will say predictably he's got nothing to show for it.
Aside from this geopolitical crisis, global warming will be the focus for most leaders gathered in New York.
Let's face it, we have no time to lose. We are losing the race against climate change.
It is so decided.
100 leaders armed with concrete plans for dramatically reducing greenhouse gas emissions are expected to participate in Monday's summit.
We will showcase promising initiatives aiming at moving away from coal, putting a price on carbon, stopping subsidies for fossil fuels, and cutting the pollution that damages our health.
On Saturday, before the leaders meet, hundreds of young climate activists will have their own summit. Sweden's Greta Thunberg, who traveled to the U.S. on a zero-emission sailboat, will speak at that event. Starting Tuesday, leaders will address the General Assembly. One of the most anticipated statements will be from the U.S. president.
President Trump will, as always, mainly be talking about himself. And he will be focusing a lot on his claim that he's making progress on nuclear diplomacy with North Korea. Trump likes to present himself as a peacemaker. He clearly isn't succeeding in that when it comes to dealing with Iran. So the Korean issue is the one that he will strongly emphasize.
Other speeches to watch include the debuts of British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, who is often referred to as the Trump of the tropics. A last-minute dropout is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whose political future is in limbo after Tuesday's parliamentary election did not hand him a clear victory. Margaret Bashir, VOA News, the United Nations.
Thousands of people are demonstrating Friday in cities worldwide for the global climate strike. Swedish teenager Greta Thunberg inspired the worldwide movement, which started in Australia today, where over 300,000 people participated. Climate change protesters in Kenya gathered in Nairobi to call on the government and the private sector to take action on the issue. Hundreds converged at Uhuru Park's Freedom Corner with placards and banners before marching through the streets of the capital to the Ministry of Environment. In South Africa, hundreds of protesters marched in Johannesburg, demanding the local government declare a climate emergency and to compel major polluters such as Eskom to reduce their carbon emissions. Now, in part 3 of her conversation with Bill Gates, co-founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu discusses, among other things, some solutions and few ways the world could adapt to climate change.
Now let's talk about climate. The report talks about climate adaptation. To what extent is it possible to stop climate change, or is adaptation the way of the future?
Well, we certainly need to do both. I wish I could tell you that the mitigation effort, that is reducing the greenhouse gases, would be so successful that we wouldn't have to worry about adaptation. But even in the best case, we will have over 2 degrees of warming. And so whether it's droughts or big heat periods of heat, agriculture in Africa is going to be tougher in the future than it is today. One of the key things from the commission, which I was one of the co-chairs of, along with Ban Ki-moon and several other people, is that we need to make better seeds.
And the commission, the Global Commission, as you mentioned, says that investing $1.8 trillion over the next decades in 5 key areas would lead to $7.1 trillion in benefits. What are some of those 5 key areas? I know you mentioned a few of them.
Well, the top of the list is helping subsistence farmers. Most of the very poor people in the world are farmers. A lot of them are near the equator where the heat is going to be very difficult, and some crops are not. You'll have to shift which crops you grow in order to have high productivity. There are a lot of things having to do with the sea level rise, where if you build mango forests, they hold the soil in, they're able to reduce the amount of flooding and the land loss that takes place. There's a lot of things about early warning systems. Sadly, we're going to continue to have storms with slightly greater intensity because of climate change, and so the resilience there is very important. Some of the things in the report are fairly inexpensive, like those warning systems, mango forests, even better seeds. A few $1 billion over the next 5 years will make a huge difference there. Some of them, like building seawalls, that's very difficult. Irrigating farms, very difficult. But we're going to have to tackle all of these things. The tragedy is that the poorest who are going to suffer the most from climate change are exactly the people who did nothing to cause it.
So far, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has invested more than $15 billion in projects relevant to Africa. How do you measure success and the impact that this investment has made over the years, and what keeps you up at night?
Well, we're thrilled at the partnerships we have, working with the countries that give aid, working with the countries in Africa on their programs to support them. Our progress in global health is better than we expected. We have a lot of challenges. We're not done with polio. Then once we're done with polio, we'll take on malaria. Malaria deaths are down, but it's still 400,000 kids, mostly in Africa, dying every year. We don't have a lot of the tools. I hoped we'd have an HIV vaccine by now. We'll get one, I think, within a decade, but that's taken longer than we expected. There are some projects that are at a fairly early stage, this idea of a reinvented toilet. So it's cheap that even in urban Africa, everybody can have a toilet in their own home, and it just processes the waste without having a big, expensive sewer system. So that may take another 10 years before it's really available. There's even some risk, can we get that price down as much as we want to? So, we're here to partner with the governments. We are excited that the work has come along. Of course, we worry about, instability and climate change and, all sorts of things that are headwinds for this work. But, the moral importance of this work to help those who are most in need, treat lives as having equal value, that really energizes us.
Bill Gates, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
That was Bill Gates, co-founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, discussing climate change with Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu. We're always excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, fresh Pan-African sounds from Mozambique. We'll be right back.
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I am Shaka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today, we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. This university in rural Senegal prides itself on being sustainable. Using locally familiar construction techniques, it's been built to protect students from the sun. Its lattice wall, made by local masons, forms a natural cooling system for its 500-seat lecture hall and large classrooms. The Alioune Diop University Teaching and Research Unit was recently one of the joint winners of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, bagging a shared prize of $1 million. But its biggest win has been in getting more youth to stay in Bambi and complete their education. Next up, the recent Gather Innovation Conference in Sweden saw people volunteer to have a near-field communication chip implanted in one of their hands. One volunteer was a tech executive who says he wanted it to replace his gym and railway card. NFC chips can be found in some smartphones, credit cards, and other items, and are used to connect with other technology wirelessly. The chips used at Gather Innovation were only activated when in proximity to a transmitter. And finally, gaming technology is helping scientists try to monitor and protect the world's coral reefs. Researchers are mapping corals from 100 different islands, charting their health and even finding remedies without stepping out of the lab. The images are stitched together to build a 3D model of the reef, allowing researchers in the lab to experience the reef in a similar way. Oceanographers say this is only possible because of the vast strides made by the video game industry. The sheer number of games and millions in sales has enabled the industry to invest in producing better technology, better audio visuals, and the big processors needed to run these games. And that's what's trending today.
Now, a new women-only motorbike club is now open in Nairobi. Its aim is not just to develop the abilities to maneuver in heavy city traffic, but also to empower women to steer past sexist stereotypes. Here's Radhia Adam.
The boda bodas and other motorbikes darting through Nairobi's crowded streets usually have men holding the grips. But the Piki Dada Club encourages women to take control for themselves.
Bikes are special in every way, every single way. The fact that they don't stop in traffic, the fact that they give you that rush, the adrenaline rush, it just makes you feel wow. So, I mean, it's just special in itself. It's not just 4 wheels, it's 2 wheels.
Patience Mehta, a farmer and administrator, started the club in June. It now has a sisterhood of roughly 40 women on wheels.
So we like to motivate each other and we like to ride with each other. So that's the only way we build each other. So we come together, we talk together, we live together, and we ride together.
Tax incentives and a desire for more efficient transportation have revved up interest in motorbikes in Nairobi. Registrations jumped from almost 16,300 in 2007 to over 191,000 a decade later, Kenya's government says. Mehta says businesses are paying more attention to women offering smaller, lighter bikes, like Indian-made Hero Karizima. But Piki Dada riders, such as Damaris Maina, point to other challenges, like the safety risk posed by cars.
We find that in some areas where bikes are not very common, they're not very
cautious about us. So you find like they will pull some moves and make some changes. Like you're driving and you find someone is just coming into your lane.
Another challenge is an outdated mindset.
People thinking it's just a man's sport, not believing that also women can do it. So we come out, we show ourselves, we encourage each other. With that, then we believe that everyone who sees us, everyone who speaks to us, everyone who knows us also will get encouraged.
Biki Dada welcomes more women to join. Founder Meta says enthusiasm is the only requirement beyond a registered bike. Razia Adam for VOA News, Washington, D.C.
The concept car shows in Los Angeles are a showcase for style and technology, but most of the cars will likely never be sold to customers. Ginia Dulu visited an auto show in Monterey where the four-wheeled trendsetters ran the show.
The first ever concept car, Buick Y-Job, was created in 1938 by General Motors automotive designer Harley Earl. It was the first car that had its headlight built into the fenders and not separately attached. It also had a revolutionary feature, electric windows.
This was the very first designer car, and it was designed to do one thing, and that was to show what was coming in the future. So you could see these various elements and say, really, I like that, that's what we want to do.
Buick Y-Job was also the first car created by designers and not just engineers. The goal was to marry efficiency and style. Today, more than 8 decades later, the creators of the Lotus Evija electric sports car are still trying for the perfect combination of form and function. This electric car can accelerate from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in under 3 seconds and has a maximum speed of 320 kilometers per hour. To get that kind of performance, the car is light and streamlined.
The way we've done it on this car is kind of quite interesting. We've taken inspiration from motorsport cars and how they manage airflow through the car as well as over the external surfaces.
The Lotus Evija is not designed for mass production. Lotus thinks it will make about 130 of them. There were some two-wheel specials on display as well. Curtis Motorcycles presented an electric motorcycle Zeus Radial V8 that has a battery range of about 200 kilometers in the city setting and just over 100 on the highway. One of its selling points, it's quiet.
We do live in a world where we're bombarded with information, and the Curtis riding experience is to escape that and get back in touch with what's going on inside of you, our customer.
Concept cars are all about what could be, and for many engineers, there is no greater challenge than creating the car of the future. Ginia Dulu for VOA News, Monterey, California.
It's time for our entertainment segment, and joining us now is Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell with fresh Pan-African sounds from Mozambique. Heather?
Yes, hello Esther. Most Africans living on the continent speak at least one mother language, and often more, plus an official language like English, French, or Portuguese. But what about those who don't? Singer Lena Bahule creates her own language, a unique Pan-African music that reaches beyond just words. I joined up with her in Maputo to learn more.
My given name is Elena Eneida Paz Baule, and my popular name is Lena Bahule. I'm a singer, and I research about vocal music, body music, and also a little bit with the more global, contemporary, Western kind of approach. Due to the whole colonial process, like my parents sort of got away from the mother language, and they didn't really like teach us to speak any mother language from here. And that was a big issue. I was like, oh my God, I only sing in English and Portuguese.
So how did you resolve that problem?
I started listening to a lot of Pan-African mother languages. And then to get used to the articulation of it, to get used to the sound of it, understand like the intonation of it. And then I started creating words that sounded like African languages. Language is not just a language, it says all about the culture and how people live. That's why my research came to the body, because I was like, okay, I don't speak my mother language, but how does my body can speak that language? When I went to Brazil, like when you're far from home, people want to know who are you and what are your roots, you know?
Do you have any albums out?
I do. I have two. My first one is called Nomade, and it talks about like meetings, like it's nomadness. So I left home, and I'm always like transitioning between home and diaspora.
What was your best song on that album?
My best song? I love them all.
What one did most people like the most?
A lot of people listen to the Congo one. Haya Congo, Congo, haya Congeke, haya Congo, 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 haya Congeke.
What about your most recent album?
Yeah, well, the second one is a partnership with a bassist called João Tauki. I really enjoy doing that duo with him. We have a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Lena. It's been a pleasure meeting you here in Sing. That was singer Lena Bahule speaking with me in Maputo, Mozambique about her music. And that's our entertainment report. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Music Time Africa, on Instagram at MTIA Maxwell, and Facebook at Music Time in Africa. Esther, back to you.
Thank you so much, Heather. All right. Be sure to join Heather Maxwell again next Friday for another entertainment highlight right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.